Well, the Hezbollah rough patch continues. Earlier today, Hezbollah confirmed that their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed in an Israeli airstrike yesterday, which just about cleans out the entire organization's senior leadership. Nobody saw this coming, at least not this fast, and at so little cost to Israel. But this war is far from over, and significant threats still remain, so let's get into what's happening. Hassan Nasrallah was the Secretary General of Hezbollah, a Shia political party in Lebanon, paramilitary group, and designated terrorist organization. Nasrallah joined Hezbollah in 1982 and took over as head of the organization in 1992. Hezbollah is widely considered the strongest militant group that Iran has helped to create in the region, and Nasrallah was instrumental in extending its reach well beyond Lebanon. Hezbollah fighters helped in shoring up the government of President Bashar al-Assad in Syria when he was threatened by a popular uprising that started in 2011. They've also helped to train Hamas fighters as well as militias in Iraq and Yemen. Now, this strike actually brings into further question the purported strength of the self-proclaimed Axis of Resistance. This is a loose grouping of organizations headed by Iran that includes Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and a bunch of Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, and a variety of smaller groups in Gaza and the West Bank. Altogether, they technically do still pose a real threat to Israel and general stability in the Middle East, but these last few months we've watched as Israel has dealt major blows to Hamas and now Hezbollah without really any response from the Axis. So all of this kind of raises the question, what is the Axis waiting for? Israel eliminated Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, and nothing happened. They've been steadily dismantling Hezbollah's military capabilities for a few weeks now, and just yesterday killed the leader of the organization, Hassan Nasrallah. We did see a strongly worded statement from the Iranian supreme leader a few hours ago. Kind of wonder if that's maybe all they can muster right now. I don't think it is, but we'll get into that in just a minute. On October 8th, Hezbollah chose to go to war with Israel. Before Israel even had a chance to respond to the massacre committed by Hamas on the 7th, Hezbollah began slinging rockets, mortars, and ATGMs into northern Israel. Maybe Hezbollah thought this was their chance. They perceived Israel to be weak after seeing what Hamas had done the day prior. Maybe they thought the IDF would be too focused on Gaza to even consider anything up north. Now, Hezbollah, shortly after they began these attacks, said that they were being done in solidarity with the Palestinian people and that they would stop when Israel stopped their war in Gaza. To me, that speaks more to the timing of these attacks and the rationale. Hezbollah's organization is built on a hatred of Israel. The fact that Israel continues to exist is enough for the group to fundraise, stockpile weapons, and dream of the day that they can remove the Jewish state from the region. So Hezbollah tied their attacks into defending the Palestinian people because that plays better on the global stage, but anyone in the region or who has studied Hezbollah knew that this was just really window dressing. Hezbollah seeks the destruction of Israel, and this seemed like the time to strike. Now, while not heavy in terms of casualties, the Hezbollah strikes have caused 96,000 Israelis to be displaced from their homes, living in hotels, unable to go back to school or work or any sort of normal life they had before October 7th. This was and is an untenable situation for Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu recently added their return home as a key war aim. Now, while Gaza is far from secure, it does look like things have calmed down there enough for Israel to have shifted focus to the north, and that's exactly what we've seen play out in recent weeks. Now, there's a lot of talk about how Israel dropped the ball in Gaza. They allowed October 7th to happen and took months to get some of the first key leaders of the Hamas organization. I mean, even today, there are still major war aims nowhere near complete. Sinwar, the head of Hamas, is still alive, and more than 100 hostages remain in Hamas captivity. And look at the size of Gaza. It's tiny. These operations are still ongoing, and there's no indication that Israel is going to stop anytime soon, but it has prompted very valid criticism that maybe the IDF and Israeli intelligence weren't the beast that they were really built up to be. These last few weeks up north seems to have changed that perception. It looks an awful lot like Israel has remained hyper-focused on the Hezbollah threat, and we're simply biding their time until the conditions were set. I mean, step back and look at this. The major threat from Hezbollah has always been their rocket and missile arsenal that's estimated to be north of 150,000 munitions, which could overwhelm Israeli air defenses in an initial barrage. But instead of that, we've watched Israel intercept nearly everything thrown their way, strike launch platforms before they release their munitions, and rapidly dismantle Hezbollah's leadership across the entirety of Lebanon. You don't stumble into that in a few weeks or even months. It's clear that Israel has been preparing for this moment for years, and we're watching a very detailed, very well-resourced plan play out right now. To be clear, the fighting in the north hasn't ever stopped since October 8th. Hezbollah regularly claims responsibility for 10 or more attacks into Israel on a daily basis, and these are regularly met with an Israeli response. Scattered throughout these last few months have also been the targeted elimination of key Hezbollah leaders. Each of these, as they become public, have been noteworthy. They're shadowy figures critical to the organization who were rarely seen in public for years on end. Then one by one, a strike is announced and Hezbollah puts out a statement mourning a senior official. It's clear that Israel had their targeting pretty dialed in with Hezbollah, at least much more than we've seen with Hamas. Now, this all sped up last week when, through a years-long covert operation, Israel detonated pagers that had been handed out to Hezbollah officials, taking hundreds, maybe even thousands out of the fight. Shortly thereafter, we started to see an uptick in Israeli airstrikes across Lebanon, and the list of now former Hezbollah leaders continued to grow. In fact, looking at the leadership chart of Hezbollah, it was very quickly whittled down to just their leader, Hassan Nasrallah. Oh, and Abu Ali Rida, who at this point seems only reasonable to say that he very well could be an Israeli asset. I mean, how does this one dude manage to dodge all of these strikes so far? As these leaders were dropping like flies, a ceasefire agreement was being circulated between the United States, Israel, France, and Lebanon. Honestly, it didn't seem like that had any chance to really move forward. I mean, the first time, maybe ever, Israel had Hezbollah on the ropes. Their key leaders were falling by the day, and their launchers and ammo depots were getting destroyed by the hundreds in Israeli airstrikes. The few launches that Hezbollah did manage to get off were pretty ineffective, all things considered. I mean, a few did impact in populated areas of Israel, but most were either intercepted or landed far away from anything important. To me, this seemed like the time for Israel to double down, not negotiate a short-term truce that would only allow Hezbollah time to regroup. In fact, now it looks like the peace talks were never really going to happen and may have just been played up by Israel to lull Hezbollah into a false sense of security. Barak Ravid reported that U.S. officials said the understanding was that Netanyahu, quote, welcomed the peace initiative, but as soon as he landed in New York for the UN General Assembly this week, he reversed course, saying, quote, Israel's policy is clear. We continue to hit Hezbollah with all our might. We will not stop until we achieve all of our goals. First of all, returning the residents to the north safely to their homes. This is the policy, and no one should make a mistake about that, end quote. Then a few hours later, we got word that a major strike had been carried out in Beirut targeting Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. Israel was trying to cut the head off the snake. What we know right now is that the decision to eliminate Nasrallah was made this past Wednesday. Barak Ravid reported that one Israeli official said that the rationale behind the attack was that Nasrallah refused to decouple Hezbollah from Hamas in Gaza and stop the fighting on the northern border. Therefore, the decision was made to take him out of the decision-making picture. There appears to have been some debate whether or not to cancel the Prime Minister's trip abroad to New York City for the General Assembly. Ultimately, the decision was made to proceed with the trip to maintain an appearance of business as usual to Hezbollah. Then yesterday morning, Netanyahu held a briefing from his hotel room with the defense minister, and just a half hour before his speech at the United Nations, new intel arrived, providing a definitive indication. Nasrallah was present at the target location. Netanyahu approved the operation and immediately went to the floor to give his speech at the United Nations, while Israeli Chief of Staff Halevi oversaw the attack from the Air Force Command Center back in Israel. Now, we have some footage showing the strike, and it was big. I've heard rumors at this point that a dozen or more 1,000-pound bombs were used, but I've not seen that confirmed. Based off the size of the blast, that's not out of the question, and honestly, it could have been even more. Nasrallah, the head of a terrorist organization, isn't someone you risk missing. If you know his location, approval to strike is granted, and the time is right, you make sure that he's eliminated. The IDF stated that fighter jets attacked the central headquarters of Hezbollah, which is located under a residential building in the Dahia area of Beirut. They say the attack was carried out while the top brass of Hezbollah were at the headquarters and engaged in coordinating terrorist activities against the citizens of the State of Israel. Now, during the 32 years of Hassan Nasrallah's tenure as the leader of Hezbollah, he was responsible, according to the IDF, for the murder of many Israeli citizens and soldiers and for the planning and execution of thousands of terrorist attacks against the State of Israel and around the world. Nasrallah was the main decision maker and the sole approver of strategic decisions and sometimes also tactical decisions across the organization. Then earlier today, Hezbollah released a statement of their own saying, quote, His Eminence, the Master of Resistance, the righteous servant, has passed away to be with the Lord. Saeed Hassan Nasrallah, Secretary General of Hezbollah, has joined his great and immortal martyred comrades whose path he led for nearly 30 years. Now, Lebanon's health ministry said that this specific attack resulted in 6 dead and 91 wounded, although it's not clear if Nasrallah and other Hezbollah officials are included in that count. Overall, the health ministry says that more than 700 people have so far been killed in these most recent waves of Israeli strikes across Lebanon. Now, if you thought the elimination of Nasrallah would be the final blow, time to slow things down and reassess, you'd be wrong. While we were still waiting on official confirmation, Israel announced a new wave of attacks against Hezbollah's strategic weapons infrastructure across Lebanon. Yesterday, the IDF issued evacuation notices to residents in a few areas of Beirut and then began another intense wave of airstrikes. The IDF says that since last night, they struck over 140 Hezbollah targets, including launchers aimed at Israeli civilians, buildings in which weapons were stored, strategic weaponry, weapons production facilities, and additional terrorist infrastructure sites, some embedded underneath residential buildings in the area of Beirut. Most notably, they appear to have been going after some anti-ship missiles that we know Hezbollah possesses. The IDF said that the Israeli Air Force struck Hezbollah anti-ship missile storage facilities, which were embedded beneath 6 different civilian buildings in the heart of Dahiyah and Beirut. We know that Hezbollah has been stockpiling a bunch of weapons from Iran over the years, and this is one of their more advanced systems, all things considered. Some of these anti-ship missiles have ranges of hundreds of kilometers and could easily threaten anyone, military or civilian, coming anywhere near the Lebanese coast. Israel says that the missiles targeted were stored in underground storage facilities concealed beneath residential buildings under a civilian guise, and they were intended to be mobilized and fired within minutes. Again, these were in the locations that Israel ordered an evacuation of ahead of time in the hopes of preventing unnecessary Lebanese civilian casualties. Then even today, after the confirmation of Nasrallah's death, Israel is hinting at a robust air campaign in the works to eliminate Hezbollah's ability to respond militarily. On top of that, Israel has recently ordered additional units to the north in the event of a larger ground war. What we know right now is that 2 Israeli reserve brigades have been mobilized as part of the northern campaign in recent days. This appears to be the 6th and 228th Reserve Brigades, along with several additional reserve battalions, set on creating the conditions for residents of northern Israel to safely return to their homes. Now, looking at what comes next here, of course, we have to be on edge for some sort of ground invasion. It does seem like Israel is preparing for that possibility, but if they do so, I would only expect some sort of limited incursion to create essentially a buffer zone to the Litani River. Really just Israel using their military to enforce UN Resolution 1701. In the near term, expect the campaign of airstrikes to continue hammering Hezbollah military infrastructure, as that's the most likely next step here. Of course, we have to consider that the Axis of Resistance may decide to take action of their own, so looking at a few statements from those organizations following the announcement earlier today of Nasrallah's death, the Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei issued a statement where he said, quote, "The Zionist criminals need to know that they are far too weak to be able to inflict any significant damage on the solid structure of Lebanon's Hezbollah. All of the resistance forces in the region stand with and support Hezbollah. It is an obligation for all Muslims to stand with the people of Lebanon and the honorable Hezbollah, offering their resources and assistance to Hezbollah as they confront the usurping, cruel, and malicious Zionist regime." Hamas's statement said, quote, "In the face of this Zionist crime and massacre, we and Hamas renew our absolute solidarity and stand as one with our brothers in Hezbollah and the Islamic resistance in Lebanon." Palestinian Islamic Jihad, also in Gaza, said, quote, "The resistance forces in Lebanon, Palestine, and the region in general will make the enemy pay the price for its crimes and suffer defeat as a result of what its sinful hands have committed sooner rather than later." Then the Houthis down in Yemen said the resistance will not be broken, and the jihadist spirit of the Mujahid brothers in Lebanon and on all support fronts will grow stronger and bigger. "We confirm that the free people of Yemen will continue to walk the path of jihad in defense of their homeland, land, and nation, and in victory for the oppressed in Palestine and Lebanon." So kind of the expected response from a lot of those groups. Still haven't seen any actual action taking place, but strongly worded statements across the board. Now, given how the past few weeks have played out, I would expect any response from these groups to be more asymmetric, terrorist-type attacks rather than conventional military force. I think Israel has really driven home recently that they are the superior military, and trying to go toe-to-toe with them isn't a healthy move for any one of these groups. So we'll keep an eye out in the coming days, but one thing's for sure, this isn't over yet. But that's all I've got for now. If you're interested in a quality free resource to keep you informed on global events, consider checking out International Intrigue. That'll be linked in the description below. It's a product put together by former diplomats and read daily by thousands of national security and foreign policy professionals. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.